Welcome to another video of this Coding with AI series. Some days back, I uploaded a tutorial on my channel, which was a tutorial for creating a full stack app using Windsurf. The same can be applicable for any other AI powered tools out there for platforms like Cursor, V0, Bolt, or Lovable. So, all of these platforms basically follow the same logic of creating apps. When I went through the comments, I noticed that there are a lot more questions that people have around coding with AI. Some of these questions were that how do you choose the tool you should be using based on the app that you are trying to create? Because some of these tools are good for creating basic tools, but they are complex to use. Some of these tools are good for creating full stack apps, but they require some learning curve, or they require time from you to create an app. So I wanted to create a full roadmap where I would be telling you that how to use these app, which app you should be using when, and then helping you understand that what kind of documentation you should be writing for your apps. This would be a complete beginner tutorial. So if you know nothing about coding with AI, this video will take you from absolute beginner to a pro level where you can create any app using just AI. I would be covering all the basics you need to understand for coding with AI. So let's get into it. Starting with tools for creating these AI apps. So you would majorly need two kind of assistants over here. One is you would need a IDE, or basically a code editor where the actual code for the app would be written. And second is you would need some tools for assisting you in the whole process, for writing the right documentation or just helping you out with errors that you face along the way. So, starting for building the app, you could either be using any tools for building complex apps. So, by complex apps, I mean anything that is more than one or two pages and have some extensive backend requirements. Simple apps are anything like a simple SAS calculator, or let's say if you are creating a free tool for your SAS, or if you are just creating a landing page for a new project that you're working on. So, within the complex apps, there are two major options for you right now. One is Cursor and another one is Windsurf. I have used both of them. They are pretty similar in terms of functionality. Cursor, on one hand, has slightly higher pricing but comes with unlimited usage, and it also has better functionalities. But that on the downside makes it a bit more complex to use. So if you are an absolute beginner, Windsurf would be easier for you to use. Plus, it comes with a lower pricing, lower start pricing, but it has multiple tiers. So now I use Windsurf. If you are watching this video before 11th of December, until then, Windsurf is free for anyone to use as much they want to. So you can right now just go and try out Windsurf. But both of them are very comparable in terms of functionality. You can use either of them for building complex apps. Now coming to simple apps. So over here, there are three major platforms that are out there right now. One is Bold.new, Lovable.dev, and V0. When I talk about comparing these tools, so Bolt, on the one, Bolt is good for creating UI. It's really nice if you are trying to create UI of app, and it's easier to get started. It tells you all the tech stack that you would want to use. For example, even if I go into my build history with Bold.new, you will see that I have used it for creating a landing page once, and it gave me the best output when I compare it with any other coding tools out there. I did not use Lovable by that time since it was not out, but until then, Bolt seemed to give a better response than V0 and Cursor if you are just creating a simple app. Then Lovable.dev is something that was launched recently, and in terms of, it's also really good in terms of creating UI. You can just paste in any screenshot on the app and it gives you good response. And another major aspect that makes Lovable really nice is it has templates within it. So if you're trying to create a landing page for your app, or maybe for your business, you want to create a landing page, you can just select one of these templates. You can just click start building, and then you can just prompt the AI to change the details that you would want. And it's a full landing page. It has all the sections. So by the time it loads, let's also talk about what other options are there as well. So Lovable.dev is good for creating UI. It also comes with templates. And it also have a native GitHub integration. That means that when you are creating a app within Lovable, you can directly push it to GitHub. And from GitHub, you can just share the repository directly, or you can publish it on Vercel or any other app that you want to. So that just makes it very easy to, use across multiple platforms. I think it crashed. Let's try once again. And V0 is also good for creating UI. It's not very good for creating complex apps. One new functionality that V0 recently added is that you can import your Figma files here directly. I don't have a premium plan right now, so I cannot show you how this looks, but I've heard great feedback around this from people. So yes, on Lovable now we have the project. So you see that we have the entire landing page over here. We can just write a prompt, to change the certain details. I can ask it to change the H1 heading to build faster, and it will directly change it. Same is true for any other functionality that you would want. So it's by far the easiest or the fastest to get going with. So it's making the changes. It also Uber-based integration. So if you are using database for your app, for example, if you are saving details of people who sign in or who do any other action on your app, then it can also save it. So that was around the tools for creating simple app. If you have to choose between one of these three, Lovable.dev is best. At the end of the day, all of them are using Claude on the background. So the results are pretty much the same. None of them are far better. Only integrations and templates are the differences between all of them. So in that aspect, I find Lovable to be the best because it has GitHub's integration. Plus, it also comes with multiple templates. Now, coming on to the next segments, these apps will help you build the tool, but you would need other tools for creating documentation. Documentation is very important when you're creating apps with AI because AI tends to hallucinate a lot. If you have to specifically tell it what you want, because all of these models are really smart. So they assume a lot of details if you don't specifically tell them. So you need to give them specific details about what flow you want and everything else. We will come to that in the next section. But right now, I will just mention that which tools are best for using it right now. For creating documentation, ChatGPT O1 is best. I am not even comparing it with other tools because it has a bigger context window, so it can understand or it can ingest a lot more information and give you the right documentation for creating your app. So creating documentation, ChatGPT O1 is best one out there. If you can also get O1 Pro, which cost $200 per month. I won't suggest going for that, but let's say if you want to just take it a notch higher. So second part is coding questions. So for coding questions, you can either use Claude Sonnet or you can use custom GPTs as well. There are a lot of custom GPTs, for example, like this one, where you can just come up with different questions. You can even ask questions within Cursor that you are facing, or and you can also go to GPTs for finding other GPTs. For example, let's say if you are coding with Wildsource, then you can just find some GPTs for it. Okay, there are none. Let's say if I want to find something for V0. Yes, so for example, we have v0.dev prompt generators, or other tools which can help you answer normal coding questions. And asking questions while coding is also a very good practice to just get better at programming. Now coming on to the third part, which is writing documentation. So for writing API documentation, custom GPTs are really good. I will come to the part, which all documentation you need and how you can get it from custom GPTs. But in general, if you have to get one subscription for doing all of this, I would recommend going for ChatGPT because custom GPTs make it much more easier to fetch documentation and everything else. So that is around tooling part of creating these apps. Now the next segment that we will get into is writing documentation. The reason why documentation is really important when you are creating an app using AI is because AI hallucinates a lot. So if you directly get into the building process and you just feel that over the period of time, you will just figure out what you want to build, you will just keep prompting Cursor what to build and it will start getting in that direction. It won't work out that way. You would have to spend 5 to 6 hours on creating the right documentation before building any app. If you are from a tech industry background where you have created products, you would understand this. That's why tech takes a lot of time for accepting any new request, because they understand that it requires a lot of time. And even with AI, when AI is doing all the coding for you, it is very important that you put in the time to specify that what you want to build, what would be the tech stack that is involved, how would the backend look like, in every detail. Because if you leave all of those up to assumption for AI, then it will hallucinate and you will eventually get a very buggy code base. You just wasted 5 6 hours on building an app that is nowhere to be finished. So rather than that, focus on creating the right documentation. That's why this segment is really important. So let's get into it. Starting with documentation, there are 5 major documents that are required if you are building an app with AI. First one is a PRD, or product requirement documentation. This sits at the center of the entire development, and this mentions all the details. We will get into what this specifically says. We will just zoom in a bit. But just to give you a brief idea, there is PRD, then there is tech stack documentation, there is database documentation, UI guidelines, and app flow. So let's start from the top. So if I talk about PRD, this is a very common term within product managers. If you have friends who are product managers or you have interacted with any, they would talk about PRD, which this document basically defines everything around the project that a developer needs at the start of it. It needs to have all the tech stack choices, the features that is there in the product, the total steps of the implementation. So basically breaking it into multiple phases. This becomes really important when you're coding with AI, because it has limited context window. It cannot remember everything. So you would have to build step by step process that it can follow to build specific features or specific integrations. So total steps of implementation and the final file structure. So if you go to any project, so you will see that there are multiple files that are there. There are multiple directories within it. So if so AI needs guidance in which file needs to be created where. So that is what you mention in the PRD. Then coming on tech stack documentation, you would be using multiple softwares attached on the back of your app. These would be multiple APIs or packages. For example, if you are building any AI based app, you would be using Chat GPTs or GPT's API in the background. So documentation around all of that. Then you would have database attached to your app. This is where all the information that a user enters or any session details get stored, so that when they log in into your app again, they see all the things that they have done in the past. This database basically stores that. So you would have to define the kind of tables you want there and what is the relationship between them. So if you have a user table, then, and if you have a sessions table, so you would have to define the relationship between both of them. Then coming on to the UI guidelines, over here you would have to define that how you want your product to look like, what colors you want to be there, what font, what design style. This is pretty much optional. If you just want to make something functional like an internal tool, then you don't have to care about this so much. But if you are creating a tool that you want to sell, then this becomes really important, because when there are a lot of apps, only your design makes you stand out. And lastly, app flow documentation. So you would have to define that which is the first screen where the user lands, what are the different sections on every screen, how are all these pages connected, when they click on edit button, which is the page where they should be redirected to. So I use prompts for all of these. I have created prompts for creating PRD, for tech stack documentation. I use them in my day to day. So I've created a document for this. You will find this also in the description of this video. Feel free to get it from there. And if you find value in it, please drop a review for it on the link. So let's get into it. I will just go through every prompt and I will tell you how you can use it in your workflow. So for creating a PRD, if you see that in the first section, there is text within hyphens where you would have to input your details for the app that you're building. So if you read this prompt, it's I'm building a product description. So over here, you would have to put in the product description, building a XYZ app that has some functionality for some target audience. So these are the details that you would have to enter yourself based on the app that you are creating. Then please create a comprehensive PRD, include details about technical stack choices. So these are the details that you would have to give to AI at the start itself. For this, you can consult AI itself. You can just ask it that this is the app I want to build. What are the frameworks or libraries that I should be using? I mostly go with Next.js. So Next.js is a coding framework. It's based on top of JavaScript. You don't need to understand all of that. But the thing about Next.js is that it has been used widely. So there is a lot of support around it that is available everywhere. It was also the most used programming language out there. JavaScript was used in most of the programs that are out there until the last year. I think this is the only year when it was overtaken by Python. But that is the reason why there is a lot of help and tutorials available for it out there. So if you get stuck at any point, you can find the same error anywhere online and you can fix it. That's why I use Next.js in all my projects. So you can mention Next.js over here. Then in the next step, you would have to mention the core. Then in the next step, you are asking AI to give you the core features and functionalities, then a step-by-step breakdown for the implementation. This becomes really important because when you are basically building the app, then you are prompting the tool that you're using, could be Windsurf, could be Cursor. At every point, this is the step that we are building right now. You need to help Cursor or Windsurf build through the entire app using that. And then a final file structure. So this is basically the structure of how your files would be looking finally. So you would have to define this in the PRD itself. So, but don't worry, you don't have to define it. Every Next.js project has a boilerplate code, and the file structure that GPT would be generating would be just based on that. It would be just adding the new files that needs to be there. Now coming on to the second part, which is tech stack documentation. So if I go through the prompt, I am developing an application that uses some tech stack. So over here, you would have to mention the tech stack that you're using. So you mention it here. It could be Next.js and any other softwares that you are using with it. If, for example, you need query to run on the background, you would have to use Node.js as well. But don't worry, GPT or Chat GPT will tell you if you need that based on the app idea. So now coming on to the next part. In this prompt, it says I am developing an application that uses XYZ tech stack. This is where you mention the tech stack and integrates with, describe the API that you're using. Over here, you have to mention the API that you're using. So for example, if I am using Clerk or if I'm using ChatGPT's API, then I would have to mention it over here. And then you will say in the prompt, please create a tech stack documentation for using the target API, which is basically the API that you're using. And over here, the details you want are endpoints, rate limits, and best practices. So the best way of using this prompt is that you give it to custom GPTs. So if you go to a GPT marketplace here, you will see that there are custom GPTs created for all the technologies out there. So if I search it for, let's say, I want to use ChatGPT's API, I search for, if I search for OpenAI API documentation, you will see that there are GPTs that people have built for this exact use case. So if I open this and I drop in my prompt over here, then I will get much more accurate results because it already have all the necessary documents attached with it. So that is one thing that you can do while building these prompts, and you will find such GPTs creating for all the APIs out there. And if there are none, and if you use any specific API a lot, you can just create that GPT yourself. Then next come database design. So over here around says I have a project that requires a database to store, describe the types of data, user profiles. So over here you have to be very descriptive while telling that what your app needs to store. Think it through, be very, very detailed while you are thinking it. You can also drop a picture of all the tables that you would want. You can just draw it on a piece of paper and give it to GPT, or you can describe it in the prompt. And basis that, it will give you all the database tables that you need to create. Over here, I mentioned that I want it to be very, very logical, because if you don't ask it explicitly, then sometimes what happens is that that chat GPTs hallucinates a bit. So that creates a problem. In the entire documentation, what we are trying to do is that we want to be as precise or as specific as possible, so that there is no room for AI to hallucinate. Then the second step that it would be following is creating a entity relationship between the tables. So for example, if you have a user table and you have a sessions table, every user can have multiple sessions on the app. So this would be a one to many relationship. So these are the kind of relationship that needs to be defined when creating a database. That's why we have asked GPT to create it. So this is our database design prompt. Then coming on the app flow documentation. So over here we are asking it to create the entire file flow. This is again very straightforward. I won't go into the depths of it. But over here you will see that first thing that we are asking from the from chat GPT is an overview of users initial landing page and what actions they can take from there. So basically describing everything that would be on the screen when a user comes in and what are the actions that can be taken. Then the same thing for all the pages, and along with that, how many sections would there be on the page? The sidebar, the navigation bar, the main content area, the buttons and everything. Description on how each page leads to the next page. So for example, if someone clicks on publish, then which is the page they need to go from there. If someone clicks on edit, then what is the page they need to go from there. And lastly, any conditional flows that would be there. So for example, if someone who has not logged in onto your app is coming to any protected page, for example, a dashboard, then you would want them to be redirected to the home page so that they can log in or sign up first and then come up here. So these are basically conditional flows. So this is something that we would be including as well. So you will notice that all of these things would be need to be clarified really well. So what you can do is you can directly put in this prompt into chat GPT, and then you can fine tune the response, basically mentioning that what are the things that it has assumed the wrong way. Or you can just give the exact details in the first go itself. You can mention that what do you want, and it can give you the exact responses for all of these. And last, the UI guidelines within the documentation. So here you would be mentioning the kind of color palette or how the design of the page should be. What works best for me is while I'm giving this prompt, I also take some screenshots of the websites I want my app to look like. For example, let's say if I'm building a SaaS app and I want the design to look really clean, so I will just go to some of the inspirations. For example, I would go to some of the websites that I like in terms of design. I will take some screenshots and I will put it into GPT along with the prompt to come up with the exact UI guideline for my app. So this is basically what a lot of designers do as well. They create a folder where they keep on collecting the websites that they like, so that when they have to come up with something new, they would have inspiration already. So you can also create a folder of all the websites that you like. And when you're creating a new project, you can just give the screenshots of those projects, and basis that it can come up with the color palette, the fonts, the design style, and the spacing between the elements and all those details. So once you have created all these documents, then you will have to save it in a folder in your project. So I will just show you how I do it. So within my project here, you will see that I have a folder called instructions. So within instructions, I have multiple files created. I have a PRD, then I have multiple tech documentations, and then UI documentations. So you will see that I have created a PRD over there. And my PRD has multiple steps of implementation. Step 1, it mentions steps 2 and so forth. It also has all the features that needs to be there in the product, the tech stack that would be used, and the overview of the project. So this is basically the backbone for the entire project. And along with that, I also have tech stack documentation. So for example, in this project, I am using Twitter's API. So I have created a file put which outlines all the important steps within the documentation that are required, that which is the endpoint that needs to be there for creating a new app. All of this was created by GPT. So if you just put in the right prompts, and if you just go through, and before just putting all the documentation over here, if you just go through all the key details yourself, then there would be nothing to worry about. You don't have to write them yourself, but you have to review them yourself. So this is how I do it. And for example, let's say if I talk about that, what, let's say if I, so from this point onwards, while I'm executing on this PRD and the project, what I basically just have to do is that I have to understand that where we are. So for example, if we are at step 1, I will just come onto the chat window over here. I will mention that please go through the PRD and execute step 1. So once it goes through the documentation, it would know that what step 1 is. And apart from that, another thing that you would have to do is that you will also have to reference the required documentation apart from the PRD. So for example, if you are creating database on a specific step, for example, the step involves creating the required database for the app. So then you should mention it over here that please go through. In my case, for example, if I'm building any functionality with X's API, then I will mention please go through X API doc for the right syntax. And for example, if I want the same things to be followed in, if I would also want my UI guidelines to be implemented on that specific step, then I can also do that. The thing is that over here, you would have to use your judgment while referencing the docs, because if you just put reference all the docs every time, that would just hallucinate the API. It would just hallucinate the agent because it was have a lot of information, and it won't be sure that which which document is important here and which is not. So that's why it's important that you reference the right files every time. So that is everything about building the product. I won't go into building the app in this tutorial. If you go on my channel, you will see that there's another video. I will just link it here, which is about building an entire app end to end. You can go through it. Summarizing the process so far. So we first chose the right tool for building a project. Then second is we created the right documentation. Then the third part is building the app by referencing the documents. So we just saw that how you can just create a subfolder within your project, and then you can just reference the docs for building the app. The last is pushing it to GitHub and deploying it. So this is pretty much straightforward. I will drop down a tutorial for it below. It's not my own video. I also reference some other guy who did it on the internet, and I'm referencing his video for you. You can just see that how you can push your project to GitHub and you can deploy it using Vercel. So that is it. That is the entire tutorial. Now you can build any app using AI just over this weekend. You don't need to know any other details. The only thing now stopping you from building that app is just you. Happy building.